when we talked about dance and resilience, and we focused on, I will bring this back in our mind, focusing on questions like, what possibilities does dance offer to contribute to the resistance and resilience of different groups, like individual groups, communities, or even society? And dance can be a form of aesthetic expression and a form of shared practice, and how dance can, in these two different forms, contribute to the factor of resilience. And the first lecture was of Dr. Isabella Helmreich, and I want to repeat only a few insights she was giving us, because she was asking, she's an expert in health prevention with a focus on resilience promotion at Leibniz Institute for Resilience Research in Germany, for those who weren't there. And she was asking if resilience is a buzzword or a universal answer for coping with crisis. She was calling resilience as seen as a mysterious force, and we're asking, why do people successfully overcome crisis while others break down and getting sick? So, and this is I think, a quite fruitful question. And she was comparing resilience with a sponge, which you can press and even press more, and then taking apart, and it always comes back into form. And I think this image helped to understand what resilience should look like. Resilience is an active, dynamic process. This was staying in my mind as a very important information. It is a traveling concept. It can be found in or be valid in urban systems, in traffic, in crisis management, in organizations, and no wonder in dance. Very important also, resilience is an individual and a social mechanism. And it's important that it goes together. Resilient factors can be trained. What are resilient factors? For example, positive temperaments, active coping skills, early responsibility, high social skills, plus a support from the social community. So in resilience, always this individual and the social aspect comes together. You can't be resilient on your own totally if you do not have the support from the community. Active coping, self-efficiency, optimism, social support, cognitive flexibility, spirituality. I would like to emphasize it again, cognitive flexibility, which was very important for me to recognize that this is an important factor for resilience, but also positive emotions, self-esteem, and a purpose, meaning in life. All these are very important for building up resilience. Can I train it? And then, I mean, the answer was so obvious for me somehow. Yeah, self-care is a foundation for resilience and as a foundation for a healthy and happy life. It concerns the body with sleep, energy, exercise, and good nutrition. It concerns the mind with cognitive training, but also with taking breaks, and relaxation is very important as a social aspect, meeting friends and family, and it has also a spiritual dimension. She was also emphasizing that there can be a neoliberal misuse of the term resilience, or the concept of resilience. So this thinking of everything can be overcome or has to be endured. We have to be careful with this neoliberal misuse or danger, and it is important, or it was important for her to emphasize that they want to enable resilient constellations and behavior, and not to make people resilient. So that was the easy part. Now it gets a little bit harder for me to summarize, because we had 2-3 different speakers from the artistic field. And maybe I can hand over a little bit later what Serge was telling us to Susanne, because she was moderating the talk with Serge. And to hand over was An Nguyen was telling in the interview with Simon Dove, because Simon was moderating the another breakout room. I was in the breakout room with Victor Ruban, choreographer and dancer and performer from the Ukraine. He was introducing in his lecture us to the possibilities of choreographers and dancers to continue working under war conditions and the development of tools from the practice of contemporary dance to help people with traumatic war experiences. And he was saying that resilience is linked to resistance in countries of war and crisis. That was a very important sentence for me. The concept of psycho-emotional health, including body and mind, instead of the concept of mental health, which is more concerning the cognitive aspect, but cannot help in situations of physical danger. Victor, I hope I summarize it in the right way. I'm totally sorry if not. I hope for your patience. How to do dance in a war zone is one of the projects Victor was introducing to us with his organization, Ukrainian Emergency Performing Arts Fund Initiative. And with this, he's aiming for the support of psycho-emotional recovery for people in war, danger, and crisis. He's doing different projects with different communities, with children, youth, and also military people. I have to switch, sorry. And no matter which kind of community Victor is working or his colleagues are working, aspects of grounding, physical aspects of grounding, centering, working with the breath are important to work with. An example, military people from the first row, very close to the war, need techniques of stress reducing to recovering faster, breathing techniques, for example. The work with children, drawing and music, very simple things with voice and instruments are important because coming back to creativity, this was also staying in my mind, no matter in which condition you are, is very important. Because when the stress is very high, your ability of being creative is, you have a lack of the ability of being creative. And if you're raising the ability of being creative, it could help in these kind of situations. In the breakout room after, we had also Hamish Olivier from Namibia. He is a teacher and choreographer and dancer, and he was introducing us to a very beautiful, I would say working process in the times of COVID, entering the studio with no idea how to start. And the first thing he was telling us he was doing was finding some sleep. Finding rest, and then walking, stopping, observing the environment to ground himself. So all these were elements of creation. And then he was somehow trying to developing different scores out of this for different groups, for professional and non-professional dancers. And the impact on the dancers with this kind of very simple movement, I would say, was softness and at the same time groundness and sharpness, and at the same time also the pure pleasure to do it and to create without the purpose of choreographing. I think
our breakout room was, we also had beside Serge, we heard already with his impulse, we had Polina Bulat, with us, and she is a producer and a manager, promoter. She was a journalist and is actually talked about the work she was producing with Kuzminski Company in Poland, in Warsaw. And we also had Tamara Masimenko with us. She talked about her work and her experience. And we, to make it short, we talked around the whole complex, but actually we always came to the base, and this was the body and the body expression and how we maybe create a language out of it. And we spoke a lot about something very essential, and how the body expression and also dance is something very essential, and therefore also something that has to do with resilience always, because it's a reaction, how we resist or how we go on, how we continue, how we move on. So the moving, the dancing, the getting forward, not to be stuck and stay in vulnerability or stay in the tragic situation that just overcame us. So we can overcome by just going on and moving. So I would say this was the very base or the essence of the subject we have been talking around. And then, of course, body expression, you know, if you express emotion and feeling and create it for a stage or in public sphere or however, then a lot of concepts come in. And I would say, you know, to be more precise in that, what we are talking about, we would have needed much more time. And this is very personal now, Susanne. I think, you know, talking about this issue would need also much more time, but I'm happy about the time we had and all we heard already in the morning, because I think it's very important, but it's also very important to give time to listen to each other. This is something that I discovered from our breakout room, that we also listened, and by listening and then reformulating with their own position, it was very interesting also to hear Serge coming from the African continent, maybe out of let me say that, and I think I hope I'm not saying something wrong. It's also something else than the concepts of our European view, and still all are in a battle of life and are confronted with systems controlling us. We have to resist. I would say this was clear out of the statements from the artist side, that resistance and creating something else, moving to change, bringing something to change was also part of our discussion, that can be done via body experiences, new body experiences, and bringing it to a language via art, via stage, via performance. Maybe I stopped there. This was our breakout room. And it made hope, I would say. So this is very positive. What happened, even if we listen to tragedies, and also connecting the three arts position was the crying, because the crying was so important in every artistic work. Serge mentioned it, Tamara, and as well Paulina, and the crying as a body expression or something that needs to be allowed. This was our departure point. So
I have to say, people were very positive about festivals, and we took a very broad notion of what a festival was, you know, from a platform for artists to being a gathering of community. We were not thinking of a Western European festival structure. but thinking of what a festival is when it brings artists and communities together. And we had 3 inputs. We had Zora Snake from Cameroon, we had Yolanda Gutierrez, who's now in Hamburg, and Anton Ovchinnikov, who's in Ukraine. And I think it's interesting, we had artists who were feeding into the idea of what a festival could be. So we had very different perspectives. And what I'll try and do then is bring them together and summarize. Essentially, for everyone, the festivals were very important, and I was heartened because I think we had the smallest number of participants in our breakout room. So I was feeling festivals are obviously not important, but then I remembered it was Tanz Bremen that was hosting us, so festivals must be important. But everyone was incredibly positive, and we talked a lot about the role festivals can play in themselves, being a very active resistance, bringing a community together, and often in a way that is important when public spaces are both contested or controlled by governments, or even gatherings are in some way repressed. So the festival gathering was really important, both for communities, of course, bringing communities together, creating a safe space to engage with ideas, to start to articulate difficult concerns or tensions in the community, and of course to also look at ways in which that very coming together starts to develop a kind of mutual strategy or act of resistance that can start to address issues that really impact that community. So in a sense that's obvious, but there was also a very strong argument for why it's important for artists, bringing artists together. One quote was charging artists with motivation and creative energy. In other words, enabling those artists themselves to take energy and vitality from the very fact of being together, sharing work, and fostering this community of practice, this community of possibility and resilience, and especially in contexts, of course, in conflict zones where bringing artists together is a really crucial part of resisting the very cultural but also political context in which it's happening. There was also a conversation about the context of a festival. Zora spoke a lot about spaces that are either have difficult histories, especially from colonial times, or histories of trauma for communities, to enable people to, and yet it's in their locality, enabling people to come together, to connect in a safe way with those spaces and start to build their own relationship to it. Really important. He talked about a dramaturgy of context, and I think that's really crucial, this relationship to the place you are. And if you remember, Anne, before the breakout session, talked a lot about working locally, connecting with the local culture, connecting with local artists, and finding ways in which that itself builds this sense of connection and focus within the local community. So the main issues I feel were about that, yes, locality, around the social. The notion of presenting work was seen to be important, and that's clearly critical for creating the dialogue between artists, but also creating social dialogue, spaces for conversation, for connection, which builds not only understanding, but more empathy, and this sense of resilience within the community was seen to be very important. The safe space to share ideas and discuss difficult issues was a really important focus for many of us. And then, yes, this notion of context, not just where you are geographically, but what context are people coming from, who are living in peaceful times, who are living in areas of conflict. What does that mean in terms of what they need within the context of a cultural celebration or festival? So this attunement and relationship that was essential to your, and not seeing audience as people who buy a ticket, but as being about communities who come together. It's really for this sharing within the community and this facilitating of conversation and empathy. Sorry, I'll stop.